So I would like to invite the speaker for the next session, Dr. Rotimi Olaniyan.
Okay, thank you so much, Tunji. And let me just say congratulations to the recipients of our inaugural set of certificates. I think they all worked very hard. And I think also we should also not forget to thank the sponsoring agencies who had, even though through these difficult times, still found the resources to be able to put them through some level of work skill development. Thank you so much for your presentation, Stuart. I found that really very enjoyable, very thought-provoking, and I am hoping that our colleagues across both client and agency side of the divide of marketing service will take advantage of that wealth of experience that you've so generously shared, and ultimately are able to put in place the necessary investments to really build out their teams. Now, I also have, I guess, the next 45 minutes or so, I believe it is, to go through a couple of slides. I'm hoping that I can deliver it less than that. I am a teacher, so sometimes I think we just basically talk a lot. So I'm going to really try and make sure and hope that maybe I have a hard stop if I'm not even able to get through all the slides. But really, my job is made easy by the quality of the presentation that has been offered already by the two gentlemen. And my job really is just to hone in on a few of the points which they have made and kind of bring everything together. So I'm going to try and share my slides now, if you don't mind. And I will ask that you please just bear with me as I also then try to get the slides done. Just 1 second. So I need to share my screen as well. Okay. And hopefully, I don't know if I need technical support, but I am trying to share my screen. So does that mean I need to be made a co-host or? Okay, I shall try. All right, fine. So I take it that you can see the screen, the slides. Can I just get a confirmation, please?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Now, my job is to kind of speak to the issue of being a reflective marketing practitioner, and to build on a lot of the things which both Austin and Stuart have so eloquently delivered on, which is the need for leaders to be able to step forward, think strategically, and more importantly, to build learning organizations. I just very quickly would like to kind of give you a bit of a background in terms of who I am, for those who might not be familiar. Just a little bit about me. I currently have the privilege of serving as the publisher and the editor-in-chief, although not so much an editor-in-chief really, because we have our content editor in the person of Intia Sukuma present at the studios there. But it's my really responsibility to just kind of try and set a vision for what this platform hopefully is going to be able to achieve today, and more importantly, into the future. And I established that as being able to top grade the quality of an entire community of practice, not just micro players, but the entire industry of practice, by sharing the resources that we all need, which are, knowledge, content, intelligence, insights, and the rest. I am an entrepreneur, scholar, I think an advisor to commercial leaders to a large extent, who ultimately have big challenges of trying to make sure they transform their businesses as much as their business balance sheets. And I think that while I'm not working, I'm also a bit of a closet writer, or at least I think I am. I have 33 years of experience in marketing. I'm grateful to God for that. And I have had a very interesting stint across both the client side, the agency side, and currently on the academic side of the equation. So when I was kind of thinking about what I needed to say and kind of deliver on, I really also sat back as it is to reflect. And really what I was asking myself is, what is it that I have learned, if anything at all, in the last 33 years of my working life, which gratefully has all been in the area of marketing, commercial strategy, and the like. I think the first thing that I've learned is that leadership is extremely hard. It is not, I mean, you cannot, we see a lot of case studies or movies or stories that talk about the mythical great leader, that kind of almost romanticizes this idea of being a leader, and that it is really all about just having a magic button. But that's not true. If anything, I think what I have understood in the last couple of years, certainly, is that success, both at the personal level and at the corporate level, is never guaranteed. I think another thing that I've learned is that the most advanced individuals, and by that I really do mean the most advanced humans in any culture and in any nation or society for that matter, as much as the most advanced corporations, as well as the most advanced societies, are those who are always asking themselves very deeply reflective questions. But also, it's not so much about the fact that they ask themselves these questions, but that they are able to show and demonstrate the humility which is required to deal with the truth of whatever those answers are. And that's for me, that's a very profound statement that I perhaps has become even more relevant. And I've become a little bit more aware about over the last 3 years, where I have been also in, if you will, kind of in a personal journey of reflection, stepping back to basically evaluate what it is that I have been doing over the last 3 decades. Interestingly, because of the work I do, which is basically as an academic and as a researcher, I've also come to realize that the richest man in the world today, if that means anything, happens to also be the biggest learner and action researcher. And so he is an entrepreneur, and we will see that shortly. He is an entrepreneur. So he is obviously an entrepreneur. He's built this phenomenal machine called Amazon. So you get who I'm talking about, Jeff Bezos. But it will shock you or surprise you to realize that as successful as he has been, he has also been perhaps the one person in modern history, certainly in the last couple of years, in the last 25 years or 30 years that his business has been, that has spent perhaps one of the largest amounts of money learning and researching what works and what doesn't. I've also learned that organizations, teams, ecosystems, and indeed nations that thrive on constant experimentation end up being able to create the biggest innovation and value producing funnels. And if there is anything that we need to understand about what we do in the world of business, I don't think it is anything beyond that. The development, the creation, and the deployment of basically innovation and value producing funnels that ultimately creates value for all the stakeholders that a business or a commercial interest, or indeed a nation, ultimately has to serve. And then when I kind of bring this all together, I guess what I am saying is that I now find that marketing leaders fail, as indeed all leaders fail, when they stop learning how to think strategically, and that the most successful commercial leaders actually are also the ones who are best at creating an organization that is always learning. These are kind of, in a nutshell, for me, the distillation of what I think my experience be in my own personal life, as well as through the observation of so many other people who I admire and those perhaps who I do not so much admire. But taking all these lessons and then ultimately, I think, delivering on some form of a reflection. I have a video to play. I am hoping the technology does not fail me. So I will play it. I hope it works properly. If it doesn't, we will skip it, but I will, obviously, because the slides will be shared later on, you will still be able to watch it. So please, I would like a confirmation that the video plays, and more importantly, that you're able to hear what is being said. This obviously is Jeff Bezos, just to introduce the gentleman there, who is the founder of Amazon.com, which really in just less than a quarter of a century has become this phenomenal innovation and value creating engine that the world really cannot live without today. If there is anything perhaps that we now know about the COVID era, we realize how powerful the logistics side of living and life is. And he fundamentally has created this, as well as so many other things. So I will play this, and I hope you're able to hear.
One of my jobs as the leader of Amazon is to encourage people to be bold. And people love to focus on things that aren't yet working. And that's good. It's human nature. That kind of divine discontent can be very helpful. But you really, it's incredibly hard to get people to take bold bets. You need to encourage that. And if you're going to take bold bets, they're going to be experiments. And if they're experiments, you don't know ahead of time whether they're going to work. Experiments are by their very nature prone to failure, but big successes, a few big successes compensate for dozens and dozens of things that didn't work. So, bold bets, AWS, Kindle, Amazon Prime, our third-party seller business, all of those things are examples of bold bets that did work, and they pay for a lot of experiments. I've made billions of dollars of failures at Amazon.com, literally billions of dollars of failures. And you might remember Pets.com or Cosmo, or give myself a root canal with no anesthesia very easily. None of those things are fun, but they don't matter. What really matters is companies that don't continue to experiment, companies that don't embrace failure. They eventually get in a desperate position where the only thing they can do is make a kind of Hail Mary bet at the very end of their corporate existence. Whereas companies that are, making bets all along, even, big bets, but not bet the company bets. I don't believe in bet the company bets. That's when you're desperate. That's the last thing you can do.
Yeah. So were we able to hear that and see that properly? Can I just get some quick confirmation? Okay.
Yes.
I find this very short clip one of the most powerful lessons for anybody who basically has the responsibility of leading people and managing balance sheets to the benefit of all stakeholders in a business. Because maybe for a certain reason, I think that over the years, I've come to realize that a lot of cultures actually punish failure. And therefore, what has happened over the years is that a lot of societies have come to a situation where our children are told you failed, our institutions fail and are punished for failing, our collective arrangements fail, teams dread failure so much that they do not step forward into into what you refer to as risky environments, bold, courageous actions, which are able to take both individuals, teams, organizations, and indeed nations forward. The most successful people in the world are people who were not afraid to fail. But actually, it's not just that they were not afraid to fail, but they did fail. It is what they did with failure that I think becomes the most important. And for me, this has become a lesson which, even though I probably knew about this several years ago, in terms of the surface level, it is being faced with a lot of challenges, personal failures as well, quite honestly, and reflecting on that and then kind of looking at the world. And I come to realize that, wait a minute, there's a process here which ultimately we must all go through, most particularly leaders. And that process is what is referred to, quite honestly, as the process of reflection. What is reflection? What does it mean to be a reflective individual? What does it mean to be a reflective leader? And indeed, what does it mean to be a reflective team? And And I've got quite a lot here which I've appropriately cited, because they're not my words nor my ideas. It is just me bringing this all together. So we've got Borden et al., who say to us the practice that reflection at the individual level is the periodical stepping back so that you can ponder the meaning of what has recently happened to you and to others in your immediate environment. Stepping back to reflect means to step back to ask yourself, what just happened? Why did it happen? Okay. As a group, reflection is the extent to which the group members themselves actually overtly reflect as well as communicate about the group's objectives, the strategies that they have deployed, and the processes, and adapting these to the current situation or any anticipated circumstance into the future. Now, across these two definitions, which are not too very far apart from each other, is the fact that they sit on a bedrock of certain processes, if you will, or certain actions. And what Kemba et al. In 2000 offer us are the solutions to this, really. There are four kind of things in their view that reflection needs to sit on. First and foremost is what's referred to as the habitual action, the fact that their activities are conducted automatically or with minimum conscious thought. You're going through the motion, not realizing and not thinking about it. And therefore, for that reason, if you do not step back, you just go through habitual action. But then there's that need for the comprehension of the concept without reflecting upon it, understanding. In other words, trying to go through that with a view to ultimately being able to find out what its significance is in terms of both personal or practical situations. And then we come to the heart of it, which is this notion of reflection, which is ultimately this internal examination on an ongoing basis, as well as the exploration of the issues that concern us and that trigger a sense of discomfort. That's every human being actually has reflection. The moment you have an experience, and we'll come to a little bit more of that. But what is important and what apparently great leaders need to do is that they must therefore go on to a level of intense reflection, a high level of reflective thinking through which they're able to then ultimately bring about transformation for themselves, for their teams, and for their organizations. And so this is something which perhaps, and I would say this as someone who has worked in Nigeria, tried to build a business in Nigeria, it's a very difficult environment to step away from to reflect. Not because we don't have the spaces, both mental and physical, to do that, but because the nature of the way in which we've lived our lives does not allow us, or has not allowed us, quite honestly, to be able to do this in a proper, systematic, and hybrid fashion. Reflection, if we're to take it a little bit deeper, is that one thing that the leader ultimately has such a very powerful influence on. Indeed, one key situational factor that will enhance the way reflection and reflexivity in a team happens is purely down to the leadership. Edmondson in 2003 did some work, and they argue that reflection is an essential part of what the team learning process is, and that a leader's behaviors will ultimately influence the way in which the reflective practice of a team is put in place. In fact, some studies have reported that there is a positive correlation between the level, type, and quality of team leadership and a team's reflexivity. So they found out that there are certain types of leadership styles, obviously, that is associated with team reflexivity. And there are some which ultimately take away from a team being able to reflect appropriately. So why is it, therefore, that it needs to work that way? On the one hand, the reality of the situation is that all leaders are called to transformation. In other words, as if I were to use the phrase that Austin offers, game changing, game changers. Transformational leadership facilitates that development of the creative problem-solving capacities that all employees should have. And it does that because it shapes the environment within which the employers or the employees, I beg your pardon, have to behave and demonstrate themselves in a certain conducive way. It means that there is something to be done in creating a learning environment if you are a leader. There is something which you have to make sure you're consciously working on. Learning is actually, to define it clearly, is conceptualized as the way in which individuals or groups acquire, interpret, reorganize, change, or assimilate different types of information, insights, intelligence, skills, and their feelings through deep reflection. But there are two different aspects of learning that we must be clear about. On the one hand, there is what we refer to as the learning process, which is the ongoing process of reflection and action. And normally it is characterized by the way in which questions are asked, how we seek feedback from each other, how we experiment. Remember, that's a very important word. How we reflect on the results which we have been given, and how we discuss failure or indeed unexpected outcomes. So there is learning process on the one hand. On the other, we have the adaptation to change, which is outcomes. Now, one of the very interesting things is that managers focus on learning outcomes, failing to realize that perhaps more work needs to be done actually in the learning process. So what I now understand is that, yes, indeed, learning outcomes, which are the adaptations to change, this greater notion of understanding about our improving performance in teams so that we can ultimately at the next quarter, when we do the reviews, be able to stand up and get applauses from the CMO or from the head of marketing or from the CEO for that matter. That we focus on as leaders in marketing, while we fail to realize that the process in itself, the way in which we ask questions, the way in which we allow ourselves to seek feedback, the way in which we put together experimentation, and the way in which we allow failure to be discussed or otherwise is equally as crucial.